It's a known fact, Snoop Dogg was one of the first artists signed to Death Row before the famous Tupac. Snoop Dogg has Dr. Dre and Suge Knight to thank for discovering him. Despite his success, he still wanted to leave Death Row Records. The only way he could do so was by stabbing Suge Knight in the back. This sparked a feud between the two and messed up the whole issue, to the extent that Suge Knight tried to kill Snoop Dogg. Keep watching till the end of this video to see why Suge Knight really wanted to kill Snoop Dogg. Trust me, you don't want to miss this. Why Suge Knight really wanted to kill Snoop Dogg. Snoop Dogg is one of the greatest gangster rappers who ever graced the rap industry. Coming from Long Beach, California, one would think that making friends with gangsters from Compton would be impossible for Snoop Dogg. But with his talent, the gangsters from Compton knew they would need him on their team. Snoop Dogg met with Dr. Dre and Suge Knight in 1992, when Suge was contracted to create a soundtrack from the movie Deep Cover. With only a few rappers signed to the label, Suge had to scout for new talent. Luckily for Snoop Dogg, he was in Dr. Dre's good books, and he had Dre vouch for him. At first, Suge didn't seem to trust Snoop Dogg, but only agreed to work with him because Dr. Dre recommended him. Snoop Dogg got signed to Death Row Records and worked on the soundtrack for the movie. When the project was released, it received acceptance from the audience, and it became a huge success, with the public giving positive feedback to Snoop Dogg's verse on the track and the money it made for Death Row. Suge had no choice but to sign him to Death Row. Things only got better for him from there on out. From taking on collaborations with Dr. Dre and appearing on his debut solo album, The Chronicle, to him releasing his own music projects, Snoop Dogg was ready to take on the music industry, and he has since maintained a successful career. Snoop Dogg's debut album, Doggy Style, was widely anticipated when it was released in 1993 by Death Row Records. The 19-track album sold over 800,000 copies in its first week after release, quickly reaching its peak at #1 on the Billboard 200 chart. Of course, with all of that money that Snoop Dogg made for Suge, we would expect that the two would have had a great relationship, but word on the street was that Suge hated him so badly that he wanted his head on a spike. Snoop Dogg leaves Death Row Records. You know when someone has done you a huge favor and you stab them in the back and betray their trust? Of course, they'd be furious and try to go out of their way just to hurt you. Yeah, this was the case between Suge and Snoop Dogg. But while everyone would think that Suge was backstabbed in this case, it was, in fact, Snoop Dogg. However, the rapper's attempt to finally leave Death Row Records contributed the most to the intensified beef between them. The beef started after Snoop Dogg and his bodyguard were arrested in 1996 and charged with first-degree murder. The rapper's bodyguard, McKinley Lee aka Malik, had allegedly shot a rival gang member named Philip Walder Merriam. Being one of his label's biggest assets, Suge couldn't bear to see Snoop Dogg in jail, so he tried everything in his power to make sure that he was acquitted. Suge hired one of the best lawyers for him, so that it could be a flawless win. Luckily, Suge's lawyers got Snoop Dogg and Malik out of trouble by claiming self-defense. They were fully acquitted on February 20th, 1996.
We, the jury in above entitled action, find the defendant, Calvin Brodus, not guilty of the crime of murder in the first degree.
While everyone thought Snoop Dogg would forever be loyal to Suge for saving him from going to jail, he did the opposite several months later. After Snoop Dogg's legal issues were solved, he saw it as an opportunity to wipe his slate clean and start a new life, one that was void of violence and toxicity, the main foundation of Death Row Records. Shortly after Tupac was killed in September 1996, Snoop Dogg didn't want to continue living the gangster life, as he believed that if he continued this way, he could end up losing his life too. He realized that the first step he had to take was to leave Death Row Records. After all, they were not paying him fairly and giving him the credit he deserved. To top it off, the record label was crashing at the time, with its name making news headlines for gang criminal-related news. Suge was piling up criminal charges. He had become a menace to the rap industry, and Snoop Dogg was done and no longer wanted to be associated with him. The decision to leave Death Row was easier for the rapper, especially because Dr. Dre, who had brought him on board, was equally fed up with being a part of Death Row Records and also wanted out. After being acquitted, Snoop Dogg decided to clear the air and end the beef with Bad Boy Records, rivals to Death Row Records like the Notorious B.I.G. and Puff Diddy. Of course, with Suge being the major reason this beef existed in the first place, he couldn't bear the betrayal from Snoop Dogg. The situation worsened in 1997 when the rapper and Diddy appeared on the Steve Harvey Show and buried the hatchet between them. While on the show, Diddy said, "Yo Steve, check this, man. All that East Coast, West Coast stuff is a bunch of media hype. He's been my dog from day one. It's all good between me and him. That's my people." Snoop Dogg replies, "For real, that's what we came here for. We came in to light it up and ride it up. We made music." Snoop Dogg wasn't safe after this and was hunted by Suge and his crew to the extent that he had to hire 24/7 security just to protect himself. The rapper only had some breath of fresh air after Suge was sentenced to 9 years imprisonment in 1998. Snoop Dogg stabs Suge Knight in the back. Snoop Dogg was terrified of Suge and he didn't have the mind to leave Death Row. But an opportunity came when Suge was in prison. The rapper quickly signed a contract with Master P of No Limit. Master P had offered Suge millions of dollars for the release of Snoop Dogg. When speaking on Snoop Dogg's exit from Death Row, Suge said, "For Snoop, it's not about that, it's about respect. But if you want to talk business, let's talk business." Even though Suge was in prison at the time, he still found a way to say a word or two about the fact that Snoop Dogg had joined No Limit. He said, "He should be happy that I didn't stand in his way to try and move on and spread his wings. If it wasn't for Suge Knight, he'd still be in somebody's cell, making dinner, washing clothes." This interview gave birth to the legendary clapback when Suge said, "He used to be a superstar, but now he's just a no-limit soldier." Snoop Dogg replied and said, "He used to be a CEO, now he's just an inmate." Soon, Snoop Dogg released a song in which he dissed his former producer in Pimp Slapped, where he refers to Suge as a just like his wife, Sharitha Knight, who was rumored to have slept with numerous men before getting married to him. Snoop Dogg called out to Suge and said, "This is a like his wife, Suge Knight, is a and that's all my life." He also said, "He was paying off with all my riches. You so hardcore, why you ain't go to level 4? Suge stated in his documentary that he was always there for the artist signed to his record label, only to get stabbed in the back every single time. He said, "I took on a fight for these clowns because I didn't want them getting robbed, and they crossed me." Do you think Suge's attempt to take out Snoop Dogg was justified? What would you have done if you found yourself in Suge's shoes? Join the conversation and let us know in the comments section below. That's the end of today's video, guys. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe for more content. Also, don't forget to smash that like button and leave a comment down below. Thanks.